How do you get people excited about performance, accountability, and growth without making compensation feel like a black box or a mystery? Today's guest, Scott Trumpolt, has been solving that puzzle for more than 30 years. He's the managing director and principal consultant at Trumpolt Compensation Design Solutions, where he helps organizations align pay with purpose, transforming compensation from a compliance requirement into a competitive advantage. Scott and his team specialize in market-based pay structures, incentive design, career architecture, and total reward strategies that attract talent, retain top performers, and build trust through transparency. Scott's led compensation strategy across North America, Europe, Asia Pacific, and the Caribbean, helping companies anywhere from 100 employees to 5,000 employees design systems where people understand not just what they earn, but why and how to grow. Scott, welcome to the show.
Great to be here, Mason. Thanks so much for having me on your show so I can talk to your listeners and viewers.
I'm glad you're here. So, when you say work is about aligning people with purpose, not just aligning pay with performance, can you expound on that?
Yeah, especially with the newer generations. When I say things like aligning with purpose, people, especially of the newest generations in the workforce, it's just come out clearly that they want to connect to something larger than the immediate work that they're doing for the organization. They need to know kind of how they fit in to the long-term strategic vision. What's the mission of the organization? And I think a lot of that comes across by linking pay to career development, not making compensation so static as if you did a good job this year, here's your performance increase. It's got to be a little bit more than that. It's got to be the understanding, okay, here's where you are in your development. This is what your pay increase is. You've got maybe less of a pay increase this year because you're already above the market, but that's also an indicator to us that you're ready for the next step in your career. And what does that next step in their career look like? Is it going to be a lateral move where they need to get skills in a different area so they can continue to grow their compensation? To me, that's what this whole concept of pay transparency is really all about. It's not just knowing what your job gets paid in the marketplace, because that's kind of just a static point in time. It's like, how do I grow my pay over time? And I think compensation becomes very much more dynamic when you're able to link pay to career development and how it fits into the business needs of the organization. You got to make those three connections.
Gotcha. Because I hear what you're saying, and I think a lot of folks just think this is what my pay is, and this is what the market price is, and what they don't really realize is that, at least in my opinion, I mean, you're the expert in this, but to me, it's all about job security, and pay raises and promotions are all about contributing exponential value to the organization. And if they don't understand what that value is or how to become more valuable to the organization, it's a waste of time.
Yeah. And the other part of it that's really important is the dynamic. You just mentioned some key factors. Those would obviously be coming from the immediate manager to the employee. But as you rolled through those, it's exactly what I was kind of talking about. It's kind of static. The manager needs to be armed with tools that can discuss, here's where you are today. We're having an annual pay review right now, and this is what you got. Now, how do we continue to grow your pay? What are the needs are going to be over the next year in our business? And how do I grow you to the next step? Because in the market, for example, someone might be coming in for that same review that we were just talking about, and they're an intermediate level cost accountant. That's what they do for the organization. Well, how do they get to the next level, senior level? Not necessarily becoming a people leader, but just getting to the next level of contribution, of growth within what they do. So the more that the manager and the employee can have an immediate, more of an intimate dialogue that goes beyond the obvious and looks forward, that's where you start pulling in this idea of career development. That's where you start pulling in this idea of individuals getting a larger view of what the business need is and how they can continue to grow and contribute to that. Now, the manager should certainly know what the business need is going to be, at least for the next year. how do they position that individual to get them more motivated? Again, you did a great job this year, but what does next year look like? Is it going to be status quo? How do we grow you? That's so important, and that dynamic needs to take place.
So many leaders you and I both know, they just treat compensation like a compliance box to check. But in your experience, what happens when they approach it instead as a culture and performance driver?
Well, what happens is that one of the issues with human resources is that, and I'm part of human resources, my function of compensation, is the idea that we are not a profit center. Okay. So we are not driving the bottom line, and that's true. But what we do contribute is programs and ideas to help move the needle on employee engagement. You see a lot of companies out there that are listed as 100 best companies to work for or top 50 best companies to work for. Why do they have that? Well, one of the reasons they have that is because they've been able to develop programs that move the needle on employee engagement. They do employee opinion surveys. They see what's wrong. They focus in on employee engagement because employee engagement drives bottom line business results. So human resources, if they want to be more of a partner in this whole concept of being a true business partner, they need to develop programs that drive that employee engagement factor. So I got a little bit off the topic of the question of
No,
what you were talking
no,
about.
you're dead on with that because you see the Gallup surveys that are talking about 16.5% of the population is actively disengaged. I'm not saying disengaged, they're actively disengaged, like hostile, disruptive, and trying to cause problems. You got, I don't know, 52% that is disengaged, just skating through, trying to get by, doing enough not to get fired.
Sure.
I mean, you just add that 52 and the 16.5% that are at best disengaged or maybe even highly disengaged. There's a whole huge opportunity for improvement if a company, as far as employee engagement and reduction of labor costs, if HR functions can get involved in incentives like what you're talking about here and engaging employees with their compensation and basically using it strategically as opposed to as a checkbox of compliance. You got your point through to me. I appreciate
Yeah.
that.
And to follow up on that, that's what transforms it from compliance. Oftentimes, human resources is viewed as developing programs, how to manage performance with your employees, how to discipline employees, these type of things, very compliance related. And I'm not saying there's not a place for those. Of course there is, but those are not part of the employee engagement factor. And that's very important because that's the only area really where human resources can move the needle to help the business bottom line and then become more of a true partner. But again, the other key thing to understand is that human resources can develop these programs, but ultimately they have to be delivered through the person that is most important to the employee in their day-to-day workplace, and that's their immediate manager. And so that's what's going to drive the employee engagement factor, the more that this dynamic can take place. So again, human resources helps to develop the programs, works with management to implement these ideas. But again, it comes down to zeroing in on that conversation and move it away from black box and static to more vibrant and robust and forward thinking.
So I know you've worked with companies that had black box pay systems where no one understood how pay decisions were made. What are the early warning signs that a company has that problem?
The early warning signs, it's interesting because a lot of people would think turnover, perhaps, voluntary turnover, losing really top employees, high performing employees for one reason or another. That can be a warning sign. But to be honest with you, compensation often, as important as it is, in terms of a true reason why employees leave an organization, it's not among the very top reasons, compensation. Because again, that becomes more of a compliance issue. It's more about that relationship with their immediate manager. They're having that lack of engagement. So a warning sign could be voluntary turnover of top performers. That could be one. Employee engagement opinion surveys, which a lot of companies, certainly companies that are striving to be an employer of choice, they're doing these employee opinion surveys and they've gotten very specific about areas of employee engagement and asking very specific questions. So that can be a warning sign depending on the feedback that they're getting from employees. But it also can be a great opportunity to say, hey, this is where we need to improve. That's why they're so important. And if you can then the next year start moving that needle in the right direction, that's fantastic. So those are the two really warning signs that I see.
Okay.
Voluntary turnover of high performing employees, finding out the reasons why that's happening, and then also employee opinion surveys, scoring low in key areas like compensation.
Okay. So, can you share an example of a company that transformed its culture or improved engagement by opening up its compensation process? Because I mean that gets people a little nervous. Idea of like, oh, open it up. And can you give me an example where it's
Yeah.
transformed or improved engagement because a
Well, it's
company?
how you open it up. It's how you open it up. I'm not, a lot of the laws right now are pay transparency. And what they're doing is they're saying employers need to post their pay ranges for people that might be interested in the job, posting them publicly and things. But that's really, I understand why they're doing it. And there's can be a trigger to better things happening, but it's kind of a dead end for the employee because it is providing more questions than it is answers because it's just providing a broad range and it's left to figure out how do I fit in there. And to answer your specific question about a company that's improved, yes, absolutely. Employee opinion survey doesn't necessarily say that people feel that they're being paid low. They don't understand how pay relates to career development.
Okay.
And so one company that I worked with some time ago, they really took this to heart. And what they did was draw a link between your pay now and your career development options through something called a career architecture, where employees were given visibility to the different levels of their own job and how they can grow into that. It didn't focus specifically on how much these different levels paid. They didn't post pay ranges. They focused on the concept of getting employees to understand that pay and career development are directly linked in the marketplace. And then here is how our career architecture system works to evaluate jobs. So it's not just your pay, but how you're classified. And it really started, they began to start with new hires coming into the organization by saying that we have a career architecture system and this is how you develop in the organization. You might have to move laterally to gain some additional skills, or you can move vertically, not only as a people leader, but if you want to stay as an individual contributor, there are higher levels for that as well. So they focused on this idea because that's what the employees were asking. It's not so much about pay, it's about transparency to how I grow my pay. And
Gotcha.
so after a couple of years of implementing this, and so employees had access through their company intranet to see how this career architecture system worked. And they showed examples of how people grew within the organization. Their employee engagement levels went up in those specific categories. That was moving the needle. Now, I'm not going to say that because of that, business results got better. That wasn't the only reason, obviously,
Sure.
but it didn't hurt and it actually helped move in that direction because it was aligning career development and pay to business needs so that they didn't always have to look elsewhere outside of the organization. They could grow people internally. It took a few years for these results to start really showing to bear fruit. But that's an example, is implementing programs, seeing them move up on employee engagement, and also noticing better business results.
So let's talk a little bit about market-based pay structures. How do you balance what the market pays with what's fair internally?
Well, the most important thing is for the company first to really identify what their philosophy is, their own pay philosophy. Do they want to pay at the competitive midpoint of the range for every single job? Do they want to pay more in base pay? Do they want to pay less in base pay, but more in variable pay than when the market says? So having a compensation philosophy helps to drive what type of pay structures you're going to be putting in place. Now, that's the first thing, because there's different types of pay structures out there. There's traditional pay grades. I won't get too deep into this. There's career bands. So a lot of it has to be built on the culture of the organization, where they are in their development as a business, and what their business needs are, what their culture is, and how they want to pay employees. Now, as to the second part of your question about this idea about a company should have flexibility. They should start with a market-based system, but there may be roles within their organization that they've identified that they value higher than what the market says, because those jobs have been identified as so important to this particular organization because of the things that they do. So while you have a market-based system, and again, it's going to be based on philosophy, the ranges should be broad enough to incorporate the fact that some roles you want to pay higher than market, and you have to have specific reasons why you want to do that. But it's about providing business flexibility. When I build pay structures, I always want the company to have a philosophy and a firm grounding, and this is what this job pays. And now let's identify some jobs that are really difficult for you to recruit for in the market, perhaps, or that really contribute to the bottom line. It may mean not a change in base pay over other jobs at that same level, but it may be that those jobs get a higher variable pay. Keep in mind, it's always about total cash compensation. It's not just about base pay. So variable pay is the other component. And there may be some jobs internally that, yeah, we'll pay them the same in base as these other jobs at the same level, but each job has its own unique market value. So let's respect that. And then for these jobs that you want to pay more than the market, let's see if we want to do that through variable incentives, or do we want to, any structure that I build always has to have some flexibility. I need to understand the business first. Even if they don't have a pay philosophy, I will pull that out of them by talking to them and listening, and to find out about those specialty jobs that you talk about. So make sure that the structure works for everyone.
So let's talk a little bit about that. What are some of the most common mistakes that companies make when creating bonus or incentive plans beyond base pay?
The biggest mistake I've seen over the years in the area of variable pay, we're not talking about base pay now, we're talking about variable pay, is the idea of transparency. And by that, I mean, before they even do one day of sales work, or one day goes by where the incentive plan has been developed, whether it's in sales or not. But let's take sales in particular. It's very important to be transactional on sales plans design, in the sense that if you hit 50% of your target, you're going to get this pay amount. And this is the percentile of market that you can expect that you'll be paying at. So wouldn't it be absolutely wonderful if that we could turn around to a sales employee and say, if you do this, if you hit 110% of your target, so you're doing better than your target performance, you are going to be paid this. And guess what? You can say to yourself that I'm paid at the 75th percentile of market. So it's that transparency of not only saying, here is $10,000 that you're going to make, and you're going to make that if you hit 100% of performance. And by the way, that's at the 60th percentile of market. Literally giving them that transparency. And the higher they go in terms of their performance, they can literally see that they're being paid at a higher level of market. It's not just a flat static number. Because a lot of employees will, who are in sales, will say, okay, I'm getting $10,000. I hit 100% of my target. What is the $10,000 based on? They never know. Did someone just pull that out of a hat? So what I'm saying is, what I do is I create calculators, individual calculators for sales plan individuals, where they can plug in and say, if I hit 80%, I only get this payout. And boy, I'm getting paid less than the market in variable pay. But if I hit 140%, I'm going to get this payout, and that equals 90% of the market. And you do it for every job. That gives them the ability to see up front. And we can get into all other aspects of sales design plan that we don't really have time in terms of accelerators and decelerators and all these other good things. But the most important thing about a plan design is two things. One, to make it fit the actual level that job has over influence over generating direct revenue. Some jobs, for example, may be leading salespeople, but they're responsible for the overall results. They're not based on individual results, but some companies try and pay them like they're still an individual salesperson. So the influence they have over sales is important, but the other piece that is most important is that transparency with this population up front. You do this, you get this, and by the way, you're at this level of market as a motivational tool. I think it's a powerful thing to say to someone, you hit 120% of target, you're going to be at the 90th percentile of your colleagues in your job across the organization. I feel that's very powerful.
Okay. Well, we've talked a little bit about transparency, and you hit on it a little bit earlier, but How are new transparency laws changing the way that companies communicate about pay?
Well, the new transparency laws, I think, are impacting companies because it's a wake-up call for them.
How so?
Because they are now posting these ranges that new hires will be coming into the organization. Employees will see the postings, even if they're within the organization. And so these people are going to start to ask questions because they see these numbers and they might say, hey, I'm in that job. Now, why am I paid not at the market 50th percentile? Why aren't I paid at the midpoint? Because these laws are asking them to post the entire range. So the first question, why am I getting not the top part of that range? Now that there are a lot of reasons why they aren't, it has to do with tenure within the company, how well they're executing, what their stage of growth is. But that's the piece that's missing for them. So it's a wake-up call for employers that since they have to post these ranges, they have to get their internal house even more in order. I'm not saying that their internal house is a mess, but it is going to force them to be more active, to be more proactive in looking at where each individual falls within the range and why. For example, if you have three employees that have been, I've seen this happen, three employees, they're really good performers. They've been at the company for, let's say, 3 or 4 years, and they're only paid 90% of their, at 90% of their market value, and they leave to go to another organization. And guess what? They're going to get paid the 100% market value of our range, but they weren't getting paid enough in our company. They were good performers. They had been there for a while. The reason they left is because it's not that our ranges weren't correct, but they weren't being paid appropriately for their level of contribution. So posting these ranges is good in the sense that while it's not going to answer future employees or potential employees' real concerns about pay transparency, it's going to make sure that the internal company is going to be looking at where people fall within their ranges and being more proactive about linking their next step in their career development to keep growing their pay. So that's the positive thing that I see coming out of it. The idea of just legislating that you post these ranges, I don't think does very much. I think it's kind of a dead end for employees. But the other piece, like I say, it's really going to make companies, and a lot of companies were already doing this. They do internal equity reviews of their employees each year to find,
I'm going to interrupt you. Let's talk a little bit about that. You say,
yeah,
so what does a pay equity audit typically reveal that surprises leadership teams the most?
they might find that sometimes an employee may come into the organization and for whatever reason, remember, an employee is responsible when they come into for an offer to negotiate. But sometimes employees will just take whatever is offered to them. And then that employee comes in, they keep improving themselves, but they're only getting, say, a 3% increase per year, and they're a top performer. And then suddenly, as part of the internal equity analysis, we're like, this person has been kind of like the example I just gave you. This person has been here for 4 years and they've been a good performer, but they're only at 85% of their market value because they came in rather green. They took an offer that was kind of on the low side, and the management just kept giving them standard increases. So there can be quite a surprise when you suddenly turn around and you see that someone's been here for 4 years and they're still not at least the full market value of their job, even though they proved themselves. And it's because they started so low in the range. Some employees will start higher in the range. Employees need to negotiate when they go in there to get the best offer that they can. But this can kind of be a surprise. Like I said, that manager thought that the pay ranges were low, but the pay ranges weren't low. The problem was the employees that were there were not paid high enough. So that came as quite a surprise to them because the individuals left, guess what, for the market 50th value that we had in our range. It's just those people weren't at it for one reason or another.
Gotcha. So you said that the best compensation system in the world fails if managers can't explain it. What do managers need to sound credible and confident when talking about pay?
They need to, and human resources is very much responsible by being an active business partner to teach them this. They need tools to understand how the employee's pay links to this idea of career development and how that fits into the business need of the organization. So the manager will certainly know what the business needs are for the next year or so. The manager will also know what the employee is currently getting paid, because when they do their pay review, they see what they're currently being paid. What they need is the guidance internally to say, hey, we're not going to give everybody a 3% increase. This employee is paid lower. They should get a 5% increase. So they need that kind of guidance, and they need to know what the next step of that employee is and what that pays in the marketplace. So they need guidance from human resources so that they can have a strong conversation with their employee at key times during the year and not have it just be, this is what you're getting paid. That's all we could do. This is what our budget is. To, hey, our business need next year is going to be this. We need to grow you as an organization so we can get you to that next level, which, by the way, pays more. I can't tell you right now what it pays more, but it pays more because that level of contribution is more important to us. And that is the essence of what I think employees are looking for. How do I fit into this company's vision on a longer term nature instead of it being very tactical
Right.
at one time? I hope that
So
answers your question.
it does. You did great. So what trends do you see shaping the next 5 years of compensation strategy, especially with AI, pay transparency laws, and generational shifts in expectations?
I think that the pay transparency laws will continue to grow in different states, and because it's not in all the states, of course, right now, but I think that will continue to grow once it takes hold. And I think that companies, especially ones that want to be companies of choice, are going to have to, employers of choice, they're going to have to pay more and more attention to their whole population and looking at what is going on within their organization and trying to develop programs to draw that stronger link between pay and career development that gives them the kind of transparency they need and generates organization. Now AI is going to be interesting because all of this starts to emanate from human resources, and human resources, again, because it's not a profit center, is probably going to be one of the people that's going to get AI in the door for what they do last, simply because of the expense involved. I think areas like finance and sales, they're going to get more of that. So I think for the time being, it's going to be important for human resources to strengthen. This is an opportunity for human resources to strengthen their partnership with the business. That's another thing that's going to be really important. In the past, a lot of businesses would say, we want human resources to be more of a business partner to us, but there hasn't really been a link to the business. And I think that there really is now, which is the exciting part, because more and more human resource professionals are seeing this pay transparency laws as an opportunity to bring more employee engagement programs which impact the bottom line. So I think this may be a great opportunity for them to continue to build their credibility in a way as a strategic business partner that they didn't have before. Because the law is the law. That's one thing, these state laws. But it's another how you react to them and how you make your businesses take advantage of that. And not just, again, as we talked about earlier, another compliance issue. It's got to be more than that. And this is the opportunity.
Okay. So one of my favorite questions, like I'm a huge Tony Robbins fan, and I was listening to him one day, and someone asked him, if there was only one piece of advice you could give, what would it be? And I was fascinated to hear his answer, because that's a brilliant man who has incredibly powerful ideas and strategies. And I'm thinking, what would, of all the ideas and all the advice that this guy could possibly give, what is the one piece he thinks is most important? And I was captivated to hear it. So I'm going to throw the same question at you. Based on your experience in many, many years, you've seen a lot in the world of compensation. So if there was only one piece of advice that you could give to business owners related to compensation, what would it be and why?
Biggest piece of advice I would give them is, whatever your business culture is, whatever your work culture is, you need to look at each and every one of your programs. And let's start with the human resources. Every one of your programs has to be looked at in terms of What does this do to strengthen the employee engagement factor? Okay. What specifically do these programs that are going on, and kind of separate those that are compliance and tactical related, but any new initiatives should really be looked at is how does this strengthen employee engagement in the workforce, which leads to better business results? And different aspects, not only of human resources, but other departments as well. Any new programs, they will be able to indicate to leadership what the cost of that program is and what the potential benefits is. But from a employee engagement perspective, that needs to be defined. That's the biggest piece of advice I can give, is that this link is not going away. Employee engagement, this is what's missing, especially for the younger generations coming into the workforce and growing into the workforce. I think the biggest advice I could give is every program that you put forward that impacts employees, wherever it's coming from, wherever it's emanating, what does it do for employee engagement and why? This needs to be looked at and factored in, because if not, that's a problem, because strengthening employee engagement is going to get the business results up.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. That's a great point. I really appreciate your time, your talent, your expertise, your vision, and
Thank you.
thanks so much for sharing that. If people watching or listening would like to learn more about you and the work you do, what's the best way for them to connect?
Well, several different ways. I am on LinkedIn. I have a LinkedIn profile page, which has a lot of information about what I do for organizations. My website, www.hrcompensationconsulting.com, has been redesigned recently, and that provides a lot of background on the different projects that I've involved helping companies in all areas of compensation. As I said, LinkedIn is a great place to reach me as well. So those are the two best sources, I think.
So, a little birdie tells me that you've got a book coming out too. You want to
I
give us any,
do.
you want to give us any previews about what the title of that book is or what it's about?
Yeah, it's called The Defragmented Consultant. It's not an autobiography. There's very few biographical sessions because my life is not that interesting for a biography. It's only important in the sense that it acted as triggers to me at certain times in my life, which I think eventually led me to becoming an independent consultant. But this book specifically, what I try and do is that create this idea of defragmentation in terms of my work, how I approach my work, where I took a lot of what I learned in the corporate world, but in different areas of independent consulting, how I utilized that prior experience and redefined it to be successful as I have been for the past 13 years as an independent consultant. So we talk about always moving forward, but it's also a book about how you can redefine your past experiences, both good and bad, in a way going forward. And it also has a lot of advice to people that may have been maybe in the corporate world for many years who have thought about becoming an independent consultant because of their expertise, but they need a little bit more of a nudge. And I try to address that in certain ways because I certainly needed a nudge as well. So I go into those different aspects in this book, but it's mainly about redefining your past to fit this kind of environment, being a true standalone, independent sole proprietor. So that's what the book is about.
Cool. Well, I can't wait for it to come out and looking forward to reading it. I appreciate you so much. And thank you so much for being on the show today.
Well, it's been my pleasure, Mason.